Welcome to our podcast that we're going to name soon. Right, Shawn?
Right, Jeff. My name is Shawn Elliott, and today I'm joined by...
N-Guy Croal of Hit Detection.
Luke Smith.
Robert Ashely, A Life Well Wasted.
And Jeff Green, now at EA. And I don't want to be your performing CEO with that hello and welcome all the time. That was a nod to our old fans.
We got you once, and we're going to play it again and again and again. In high school, at some point, I was sitting bitch in the middle of a fucking lifted Toyota truck, as happened in Lakeside, California. And I had to take a shit, something fierce. We were driving over to this guy Chad's house because his parents were going to be away for the weekend, and he had some alcohol over there. So we were going over there, and I get to this guy's house. I had just gnarly molten bowel syndrome, and I get in there, and his parents are still there. They hadn't left yet, so I have to meet everyone. But the very first impression they all had of me is me rushing into their bathroom and then proceeding to do the fucking Dumb and Dumber maneuver, make their whole place reek. So anyway, they leave. We start drinking, which we shouldn't have been doing, but we did anyway. And Chad, who was the host, got drunker than everyone first. And immediately after declaring that he was so drunk he didn't even know he was drunk, he passed out. And that was our cue to basically get on his phone and start calling all these different pay numbers that used to be all the thing in the 80s. So you'd have this number where you call if you want to hear someone crying, or you call and you want to hear a shitty joke, or you call and you want to be scared, or if you call and you want to get off. And they're all $1.99 a minute or something.
What makes people all over America break down and cry like this? Call 1-900-740-3500 and hear it for yourself. $2 per minute. If you're under 18, ask your parents before you call. 1-900-740-3500.
So when you call the crying line, is it just that they're like, ha ha, we got your money, bitch?
No, it's serious business. They just sit there and cry. And, it's the usual, too. I mean, after we did a couple of those are just pre-recorded. And then, the sex line, of course, I mean, it's ridiculous because they do anything they can to keep you on the phone to prolong the foreplay. So it's the most frustrating thing where, on the caller's end, you want to get off as fast as possible to save your green. And, of course, on their end, typical Mars and Venus scenario, they want as much foreplay as possible to take all your green. So I don't know how much money we ended up taking from Chad in the first place. But the moral of the story is that a lot's changed since then. I mean, this is all pre-internet era shit where now the internet taught us to want everything, expect every form of entertainment imaginable entirely for free.
Yep.
And yet at the time, 15 years ago, there was so fucking little to do in the world that you would pay money to hear someone cry or tell you a joke on the phone. And this pretty much...
In those... Yeah, go ahead.
Wait, who's gonna go? Whose turn is it? This is an awkward first date.
Yeah,
I think
you go.
So am I gonna go down on you
me
first, or are you gonna do it first?
I think you do me first.
If you have something to say now, otherwise I'll continue on.
In that crying phone call, were those people that were crying that we were watching? Were those the people we were calling, or were those callers? I didn't get it.
No, those are the people you call. When you just want to hear someone crying, you call that number.
Fuck.
Is that number still up?
Wow.
Can we get him on the show?
So it's like now this is like part of the point. Like now in the internet age, you could click any YouTube link and see someone in like just pretty much the lowest point in their life, just crying and having a hard time of it. But back then, you'd have to pay for that.
But I'm going to call bullshit on that because the commercial's like, what makes these people cry? It's like a mystery thing. They want you to call and find out like what's making them cry. Like they're going to tell you, the saddest fucking story you ever heard. But you call and it's people crying. That doesn't even make sense.
Don't we all have enough problems of our own?
Why don't you call the number right now and see if it's still in operation?
That was a great idea.
I need to call my mom and see if it's okay first.
So the whole point of all this is this first topic. We're going to take a look at all of us were born. We came of age before the internet was widespread or even in existence for some of us, and if not all of us. And just kind of basing this discussion on a book that came out late last year, which I recently read. It's called Born Digital. And it's understanding the first generation of digital natives. The reason I got it in the first place is because I've sort of always been thinking about just how differently my childhood would have been had I grown up with all the things that you have today. And so I sort of want to get into that later. But the book itself, I can't particularly recommend. It was written by two lawyers, and it reads pretty much as though it were written by a couple of lawyers. So just really, really wooden prose. And they survey most of the general features that I think gives us a jumping off point in many directions to talk about some of the specific changes that the internet's introduced into our lives. But they fail again and again to provide any sort of examples or any sort of hooks to give some like material substance to what it is they're discussing. So on that note, I would like to talk about that with you guys. Actually, one other thing I wanted to say about it is that just for the overview, is it just for me, anytime you're reading a book, you tend to assume that it's got to be well researched, it's been vetted. It's almost when a book's been published by a major publisher, it's almost the equivalent of scientific research undergoing peer review. You just assume that factual errors aren't going to make it in, and you sort of take that for granted. But then reading this book, I got to this awesome line that said many of the popular games sold today, including Soldier of Fortune, Doom, Mortal Kombat, Gunman Chronicles, Wolfenstein 3D, Duke Nukem 3D, and Bioshock, involve super realistic scenes of violence and feature massively aggressive actions. But it was like, okay, so again, this book is published, first run publishing, late last year. And the fact that he's talking about the popular games sold today, like Gunman Chronicles, which was like came out around the time of Half-Life 1 and was anything but popular, really made me stop and think, okay, if they got this so wrong and no one even thought twice about it, is this saying that the copy desks and the editing staff at these major publishers are just, this is their one significant blind spot? Well, or is everything else in here this fucked up?
Well, Sean,
you worked in publishing.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that, if you look at James Fry and the whole controversy over A Million Little Pieces,
right.
And there have been a number of memoirs that have since been exposed. The most recent one, the name is escaping me right now, but was the story of this Holocaust survivor. And at least in this case, it turned out he was a Holocaust survivor, but he had this whole story about how there was a girl who would meet him by the fence at the concentration camp on the other side, and it was a really heartwarming story. And then it turned out they met later on and realized that each one was the other that they had known in their childhood, and they got married. Well, it turned out that he made that up. He had been.
He didn't make up the existence of the woman. In fact, that was his real wife.
It was his real wife, but
that whole story was fictionalized.
And what it turns out is, especially these days, as there are sort of more and more cutbacks, is the accuracy, the factual accuracy of the book is the responsibility of the author, not the publisher. These books are not fact-checked. That's a practice of magazines, and a lot of magazines are, eliminating their fact-checking departments in the cutbacks that we're seeing right now. So, I talked to a friend who wrote or sort of helped ghostwrite a book by a pretty major author, major public figure, and one of the things that was in the contract of the author was that the author had to undertake the editing and fact checking and all of those things. That was all pushed down to the level of the writer. So, I think you're right, and it would certainly encourage people, anyone who's listening to this, be more skeptical of the stuff you read in books, because it really does depend on the author.
Which is an interesting point, considering that one of the chapters in the book Born Digital is about the quality of concerns with the quality of information now that everything is moving online, and for those very same reasons. But it's kind of ironic, and sadly so. So one of the first things I want to talk about is privacy. When I said they do a good job of giving you a bare bones overview, they will point out that now, an average child when you're growing up is, from the moment you're born, you're going to have a number of medical records that you wouldn't necessarily have had years and years ago, but you can have images of your birth, perhaps, grossly, videos of you coming out the pussy all over Facebook, all over, MySpace and all this stuff. And then so, as you imagine all this stuff that accumulates through your life, so that they outline all these places where another bit of information is added to your digital dossier. But what they're not saying, and pretty much I think for me the way to summarize it is, imagine when this generation comes of age and produces its presidential candidates. And imagine how, that really brings it home for me. And when you think about, what they're going to dig up, they're going to know that, this candidate searched donkey fucking when he was, 12 years old on Google. He, did this, that, and the other thing on all these sites. So what I want to talk about there for you guys is, is that a concern to you? Do you sort of just blithely go along on your internet lives, putting information about yourself out there? Do you police it carefully? And then, questions we don't have to answer right now, but coming right after that would be about the extent to which you sort of bare yourself. How do you decide how much of yourself to expose to the world, and how much do you keep private?
I always put in Ryan Scott's name, so side I'm on. So.
Again and again, you log into Google as Ryan Scott, so that all searches come back to him.
Exactly.
Okay. It just depends on whether. For me, it just depends on whether or not I'm talking to Shawn Elliott online in some fucking podcast thing, whether or not I'm going to say something embarrassing about myself. But I figured that, in the future, everyone's going to have their most disgusting laundry completely accessible to the public. So it's not even going to matter anymore. You're saying, a presidential candidate is going to be attacked for his internet searches. It's please, everyone is going to have their shit out there.
Everyone will have their shit out there, but it's just not necessarily the case that people are looking into it with the good degree of scrutiny that you'd get if you're a candidate, So, is that part of it? Do we just – I think a lot of people kind of assume that. They say, well, who am I? Who cares if I put this out there, because no one who of any significance is going to find it. It's not like an employer who's in a pre-interview process is going to look through and see what my footprint on the internet's like. But actually, I think – that's a mistake, because more and more you're seeing that really is the case.
Yeah, I'm not. To me, it's not such a worry about when I think about kids today, putting stuff out there that they're going to get in trouble with their employers. But imagine having that extensive record of your adolescence on the internet, not just for other people to look at, but for you to look at. If I could go back and look at a lot of the stuff that I was doing when I was 12 years old, and pictures of myself and my friends, it would be a really depressing thing. I feel really bad for people who have to face down their middle school years documented, in digital life. That's a bit
right.
Has everyone here seen the movie Lost Highway?
Yes.
So the part where Bill Pullman, basically the first half part of the first half of the movie is about someone is sneaking into the home of the characters played by Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette, and videotaping them while they sleep and sending them these videos, dropping them off in the house. And the cops can't solve it; they can't figure out who or how this is happening. And so at the end of the cops basically kind of throw up their hands and say, well, they're not doing anything to you. Why is this concerning you so much? And Bill Pullman says, I want to remember things the way I remember them, not the way they actually happened. Mm-hmm. And as someone who's not a super nostalgic person about events, I'm a bit sentimental about people, like friends that I still keep in my life, but I generally don't sort of, go back down memory lane. It's always weird to me. When I was clearing out my office, I found from like my entries from like aborted attempts to keep a journal or poems that I'd written to a girlfriend and stuff like that. And I chucked all that. I mean, I looked at it, and it was so weird. Some of it brought me back to exactly where I was in that moment. Other stuff was like, I can't believe I was that guy. And like, I chucked it all. Like, I'd rather move forward and not have all that stuff sitting around.
Yeah, there's the ability to basically rewrite your own history in the way you're saying. In the same way that, like, you know, when I went to Chad's house, I don't recall exactly which lines we called. I just knew there were a whole bunch of bullshit. But then there's this other level of, like, yes, this stuff's embarrassing. And at the time, I think all of us, we do things at the time that we think are the fucking baddest things in the world, or we think they're, you know, the coolest things in the world. And they might be just meant for one person, you know, like say, you know, you're pining for a lover or something. And before, you know, back then, you just write a letter about it to her, or you call her on the phone and you go hide in your closet and you're like, you know, Mom, I'm on the phone. But now people are like tempted to put that shit on their blogs for the entire world to see, as though, you know, they're trying to like get double duty on the single thing. So like, hey, maybe I can win this person's love, and at the same time, I can make everyone see what a poet I am or something. But I think that a lot of people, I mean, all of us, were totally like susceptible to making those sorts of bad judgment calls. But then it's just there. That shit's just hanging out there.
I was thinking about that recently, and this is really gonna. You're gonna have to stop me if I'm sounding too much like the grumpy old man. But you know, when I was in middle school, this was pre-internet, and this was pre-email even. And so when in about 7th grade, I got my first sort of girlfriend, not really a girlfriend because, you know, I don't even know how much we actually declared it out loud. Also, we were in separate cities, but the point of the story is, in fact, that we were long distance. So we started writing letters to each other. And these letters were so important to me, and they meant so much, and I spent so much time actually crafting the sentences of what I wrote, and the feeling of actually dropping that thing in the mail and knowing, you know, I couldn't take it back, knowing that was permanent, you know, was really, really scary. And on the opposite side, getting the letter back, which would now take, you know, it would take over a week. You'd be talking like 3 days for it to get there, 3 days to come back with time for her to respond. You know, all the tension and all the excitement of that interaction back and forth was something that I don't even know what kids today would have that was anything like that.
Well, it's kind of like when you've been out with someone the night before and you hooked up, and then like sent a text message the next morning, and you're sort of waiting, and it's like it takes 2 hours to get a response. You're like, oh my god, you know, you're all in the phone.
Right.
Oh god, you would text someone the morning after? Oh my god, really?
You could actually Twitter it. You could Twitter during the date.
Oh my god.
This chick is a hose beast.
I'm sure people do that. I bet that's probably happened. Someone went on like on a blind date or like a Match.com maneuver, and they're sitting there, and they're probably giving the world information that they're not giving their date.
But I think. Sorry, I'm just going to say the thing that Jeff's talking about that is gone is that sort of kind of human interaction where you actually stop to think about what you're putting out into the world before you put it out into the world. Like he's talking about, you know, sitting there crafting this letter, this thing that he's going to send to someone, and really thinking about it. Whereas now I think people just tend to go online and verbally throw up over like anything they know.
Yeah,
you know, it's really
rewrite it. Yeah, I'd crumple up the paper and start over.
Yeah, that's definitely gone.
I don't know. Come on, you don't do that with texts. You don't look at a text to your lady friend or a lady you'd like to be your lady friend and go like, yeah, I think I'm gonna throw a semicolon in here instead. Like people don't do that still. I feel like I do. I feel like a tactically used semicolon is like that's almost as easy as boozing a chick to get into her pants. I'm just saying.
Chicks dig the semicolon. I will say that.
Yeah, you use it correctly.
It used to be too where like, you know, you're talking about the time lapse thing, you know, you would, the letter's one thing. There's even like, you know, you'd call a girl and, you know, she didn't answer or whatever, she had her brother or sister answer, and you don't hear back from them. And then, you know, you could wait, you know, days or something to get to to hear back from someone. And I'm thinking it's probably a lot harder for girls now to let dudes down easily because, they're getting like blasted on their like MySpace page. They're getting IMs. They're getting like texts, all this shit. And it's like, you can't just say like, oh, my brother never told me you called, or, the sorts of things that they would pull back then.
This is embarrassing. This is embarrassing.
I'm going to put a little... Yeah.
But then you can go, Jeff.
Okay.
A friend of mine and I went and saw that movie that just came out, which is interesting, considering all the ways to get in contact with people Shawn just mentioned. We just saw He's Just Not That Into You like a month ago, and this is in this.
Whoa! Wait a minute! Isn't that like the Dr. Phil book or something? The Oprah? Like
I have no idea. I'm like, the girls in the cot, whatever. I'll go. And in it, you have these women in the movie are complaining about it from the opposite perspective, where they're saying like, well, now with all of these ways for people to get in touch, you have to obsess over each like different method. Like, oh well, if I text this time, then I email the next time. Well, then it gets confusing. Like, should you just be consistent? And so some of the stuff that you guys are talking about here actually like plugs in comically with that. And it is interesting thinking about the myriad ways people have to get in contact with people. And I think even more interesting when examining the relationships that, and I don't mean that like, marriage, blah, blah, blah. I mean, even with people that you're dating, those of us who are still allowed to, the way that people communicate and the methods that they choose, I think actually becomes like this really interesting metagame of the whole process, and like trying to figure out why people behave the way they do, or why they use this form of media versus this form of media is actually like one of the little puzzles about people that's really interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm. I want to hear more about that because I know like Jeff and Robert and myself, we've all been either married or in relationships from the time we've been using computers. So like, if either, you or N-Guy have done any like digital dating and shit, like tell us about how that goes. Like what's it like to meet someone on the internet, go hook up?
I haven't ever actually done that. I'm talking more about in general, like after meeting someone and maybe you exchange numbers or you get an email or going from there and just watching, like just sort of watching that the matrix of ways that you can get in touch with someone emerge, and then what forms of communication people use is actually really interesting.
Well, you see now all the time, you see people's like Facebook status changing. Like, so-and-so went from being in an open relationship to single. That was actually an example I saw on my thing, and I was like, well, I didn't see that coming. But like, but for the most part, you see this kind of thing. Like,
yeah, that always freaks me out. On Facebook, there were 2 cases I saw this week where people who I'm just sort of acquaintances with changed their status from in a relationship to single. And then there's this like series of, oh, sorry, dude, comments after. It's like, man, keep me out of that shit. I don't want to.
Yeah. and again, too, it's kind of the whole thing. Like, what happens? Like, if you say you're in a relationship with someone in this era, and you end that relationship, and one of you immediately sends that update out, and then the other doesn't. It's like, do you have to keep bugging them? Come on, update your page. Update your fucking page. Broke up, bitch.
Hey, she hasn't told me yet. What do you mean she's not in a relationship? That'd be actually a great way to break up with someone.
Well,
hey, dude, check your Facebook status.
It also goes the other way because it's like I definitely had friends who were in situations like where it's they're in a relationship now, and it's like at what point in the relationship do you graduate to the point where you change your status, right?
Oh, never. That's a hard and fast rule. Never.
What do you mean, Luke? You get in a relationship, you just like it's not going to reflect on your Facebook page?
Yeah, if you actually drill into my Facebook, you'll see there's almost no actual information about me at all. Like in my basic information. Because I really think that people on the internet are really creepy. And like this, I wanted to mention it earlier. There's some sub app for Twitter, and I see people using it. That's like, this is exactly where I am right now. Like, I'm at Shakey's Pizza on Fifth Avenue. Like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, one, I don't care where you are. 2, you're like twittering with your wife and referring to her as like whatever her Twitter name is. Like, have a nice night with your wife. You don't need to let the internet know that you two are at Shakey's Pizza enjoying like the veggie special. No one cares.
About it. If the husband's about to get lucky, he definitely wants the world to know this might be a once in a lifetime occurrence. he needs the encouragement and the support from his 1,000,001 Twitter friends.
That's like Twitter. Go ahead.
We could do a whole show on like the sad signs of Twitter. I think.
Yeah,
there's a whole like if you follow more people than follow you, I think, right? I think you're doing it wrong. Like, sorry, you probably don't need a Twitter. Like, if you're like, I'm following 700 people and I have 18 followers, like, it's time for you to fucking let your grandma, your aunt, and your best friend from 3rd grade down gently and close the Twitter account. Seriously, like, I'm following that girl from the guild. Like, it's time. I mean, I'm giving her feedback on her show, and she's reading it. Like, I don't think she is.
He could go too far in that direction, though. I think. I mean, do you guys check your like Rory, my friend, pointed out to me? He's like, he told me that I like treat my Twitter followers like the fucking surviving humans in the series Battlestar Galactica. Like, I keep count on each one, and I'm like, fuck, I lost one. Someone shaft last week. The fuck do I do about him? Someone have a baby and make me another follower. But I think we all we all notice that shit, if not down to the single digit. Like, I mean, we're aware of it, and it's like it's kind of like a sad, like, look at me. I mean,
Shawn, in your case, I don't think you have to worry about getting in touch with your grandmother or your aunt or your friend from 5th grade because
the fear is that they find it.
You've got 6,546 followers, and you're only following 5 people.
Fuck, yeah, I got 3 more, dude, in the last 10 minutes.
That's a good ratio.
My family will ever find this stuff. I mean, does that go for you guys?
Actually, I just read something. You mentioned family, and I read something. I don't know if someone on Facebook linked to it. It might have been, but about what happens when you die. Like, what is the concept of digital death?
Dude, people think you're checking your MySpace.
Yeah, no, but how will your 6,500 Twitter followers know that you're dead, other than like NeoGaf probably like soliciting your death record and posting it? Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, like, this is a really interesting concept of these, like, the digital footprint that people leave. Like, or like 10 of my Xbox Live buddies who I don't know in real life. Like, if just one of them goes away, to me, if he dies, to me, it's like, oh, XXX Sniper Wolf XXX is no longer playing Xbox Live. Like, he just doesn't get on anymore. Like, there's no real way of understanding, like, oh yeah, that dude died. Like, it's
yeah, they should add a death option to Xbox Live so that when you log on and one of your friends dies, it comes on with this like sad music and is like in loving memory of XXX Sniper Wolf XXX.
Fucking
yeah. Then Xbox needs to figure out how you're alive or dead.
What I want to know is you're talking about people changing their relationship status on Twitter on Facebook and letting everyone know that they've broken up, and how you get those like awkward replies from people that are like, "Oh, bummer, dude. Sorry to hear that." What I want to know is like when people start having their parents on an application like Facebook, and like one of your parents dies, does it say like, Robert Ashely now has one parent?
Oh my god!
Oh my god! Sorry to hear it. Like,
bummer, dude. Sorry, bro. I'll bring over the GameCube.
That kind of like public grieving is just disgusting to me, and I wouldn't want anyone to know if that happened to me. And
it does tend to make, I think, for me, so much of like human interaction seem like all the more superficial. It's like your birthday, and it's announced to everyone, and everyone sends you the obligatory happy birthday, and it's like I'll send people birthday wishes too, and it's kind of like, but they don't know that like I mean it with any degree of sincerity, or if I'm just doing it because I do it. And it's like, I mean, but if it's a close friend, someone I interact with daily, I mean, they should probably figure it out, because it's like I'm just like horribly, like, I don't know, just not tuned into that sort of thing.
By the way, I want to throw out the random fact I read in the San Francisco Chronicle this morning, which is that Facebook is now the second most popular visited website in the United States after Google.
Well, that sounds about right. Do you, Jeff, your daughter, I mean, uniquely among this group, you've got a daughter, and are you like friends with her on Facebook? Do you ever go and look and like see like?
Yeah, I was going to bring this up. She's 15, and she is on Facebook, of course, with all her friends, and was incredibly annoyed when all the adults, not just me and my wife, but adults in general, started showing up there. Because, this did trickle upwards from a teen base.
And that's why Facebook won't last. It'll be replaced by another, by the next upcoming thing for that reason. I think people will be
she's actually, I looked in her groups recently, and she's in a group called, teens against parents on Facebook or something like that. She doesn't know. She doesn't know I can see that. But, she did friend me, so I can go there if I want to. I try to respect her privacy and not hang out there. But, of course, since she friended me, I see all her updates. And then I can see the comments that her friends are making. And they may not be my friends, but I can see what they're saying. And, my usual reaction is, man, I sure hope she doesn't fucking talk that way, too. Because it's usually pretty rough. So yeah, and this is her main mode of communication. In fact, I found out just this week alone that this way for me to contact her when I'm at school, when I'm at work and she's at school, or if we're apart for whatever reason, and it's going to be electronic, is not email, it's Facebook. She will check her Facebook email before she checks her Gmail account, because to her, email or Gmail is dead. It's all about Facebook.
That's pretty much how it is with my nephew too. Like he only uses Facebook. I don't think whenever I send him an email, he totally ignores it. But if I can send him a Facebook message, preferably with like a link to an illegally downloadable album, then he might respond to me.
Right, so you need to consider that, like for the digital age, like email is now already starting to be considered old.
Yeah, and for me, I'm sort of the opposite. Like where I only check. I mean, when I started using Facebook, I was sort of very deliberate about it. Was just friends and wasn't taking requests from people I didn't at least know or had met. But at the same time, I decided I'm going to treat this like LinkedIn on steroids. So it's not going to be about personal stuff. So I would take, requests from PR people, the people in the industry and that kind of thing. Then I started getting requests for people you'd have to term as fans, like people who had read my work and liked it and wanted to connect. But I was like, I didn't want to accept all the requests. So what I said was, well, if they include any text at all, like just like I like your stuff or would you please add me or whatever, just any text along with the request I would accept. But if it was just a request, I wouldn't. And then finally I just succumbed and said, hey, come one, come all. I take those messages and I'll add you as a friend. But then what happened was I got into Twitter, and what I like about Twitter is the same thing I liked about, the World Wide Web back in '94 when I started working at the Washington Post's online service, as opposed to online services, is I like the idea of something that's completely an open network as opposed to a closed or semi-closed like Facebook. Anyone can join Facebook, but not everyone has, whereas anyone can sort of get to my Twitter feeds just by going to, twitter.com/Croal. So, but I connected the two. And what that creates is this weird thing, like where, because of how often I Twitter, people on Facebook think I'm on Facebook. Now that Facebook, it's been a while now that they dropped the origin. They used to say that this is from Twitter. Now they don't do that anymore. They probably realize, hey, we're giving Twitter all this free PR. Why do that? And so there are all these people who think I'm on Facebook way more than I am. For me, like Twitter, Facebook is not like a super live place. Like, this is not how I choose to communicate. I'm much more email oriented. What Jeff's bringing up is a really good point, is how this completely changes. And I don't know if you guys deal with this on Facebook. The other thing is, it's one thing to message people. Like, I would message someone that I didn't know personally on Facebook if we were friends, if we connected somehow. But I get chat requests from people I don't know. Yeah, we're friends, but I know you don't know me, you know you don't know me, and you're sending me a chat request.
Yeah, that's how it goes nowadays.
I've actually
you should try Steam.
I was a reluctant. I came reluctant.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Experiencing technical difficulties. We have lost Jeff Green.
Jeff Green came reluctantly. It doesn't sound like... So one of the things that I want to talk about, when N Guy was talking about how he adds people, I just clicked over. I have a kid sister. She is 16. She has 1,014 friends. Like, when I was 16 years old, I think I knew, 70 people.
Yeah, and how many of those people did you like actually care for? In my case, it was, call me self-centered, but it was probably, 7?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was talking, and my whole mic fell out. So I was talking to myself for 2 minutes and realized that the mic cord wasn't attached to anything.
Well, you're back in action now, Jeff.
You were coming reluctantly to Twitter.
I was coming reluctantly. Is that what I said? Wow.
Yeah, you were coming reluctantly on Twitter.
If you want to gather your thoughts, we can just keep going and come and pause this as soon as you remember what you're saying.
Well, what I was saying was that that in Facebook, I was much more strict with who I accepted or not, and in fact, most of the time, I felt too guilty to ignore them, so they're still all just sitting in limbo like hundreds of people. But I did decide, and this was before Twitter came out, I decided my delineation was going to be, if I knew you in real life, I would add you. Didn't matter if we were friends or if you were just like a work acquaintance, or if but if I didn't know you, you couldn't be my friend. And that made me feel like it's okay if I post some more personal stuff about myself or photos or whatever. But I didn't want to just have random people be my quote unquote friend. And I kept it that way. So, but then what Twitter allowed me to do was to do what N-Guy talked about. I could just broadcast that way. Then anybody can follow me, and it doesn't matter. And I know that what I'm saying is going to everybody, and that's fine, and that's actually kind of cool in its own way. And that way I can keep those two things separate. So,
what happens though when everyone's your friend? I think we've all sort of much followed that same course where, it was exactly the same for me as you're saying. Got to the point where Facebook, I was like, all right, I'll use this as a means of for business connections and stuff, and then it just got to the point where I opened the floodgates, and that meant changing the face that I presented to the world on Facebook and getting to the point where now it's awkward where, it's interesting to see suddenly, all these old people I remember from high school are gradually getting caught up with the internet or whatever the case may be. And then, they add you as a friend thing. And it's like, hey, I do want to talk to this person. I remember this person. I'm interested in them. And then I send them a private message, and it's like, they always reply on my wall. And it's like, because for them, that difference isn't there. They don't understand why I would want to have the private messages. And not that there's anything scandalous or anything, but it's just like, hey, I don't need to be having this conversation about remember the time, this or that happened in public view,
Yeah, that's
oh,
go ahead.
I feel like even with Twitter, that it gets kind of weird when you have I have real life friends on Twitter, but then the way normal people use Twitter is to sort of have conversations back and forth with each other, and I like to do a little bit of that. But then I start feeling weird about it because I realize that there are 3,500 people looking at it, and it's like, how boring is this if I'm really trying to provide some sort of interesting content for people to have to look at my back and forth about oh man, that was delicious pizza that we had last night. It was,
Well, that's what the direct message is for, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like when you try to direct message someone and they don't understand and they reply back on your wall, because it's like they're unable to make that distinction between a public self and a private self on the same scale. I think that you have to once you have hundreds of people added.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the things I think about when I'm Twittering is I'm very conscious that it's for public consumption. I am publishing. It's not the same as a blog post or a story from when I used to write for Newsweek, but it is publishing. And so I try to do a couple of things in each post. I try to be informative. I try to be entertaining. I might try to tweak someone or provoke or be provocative, but there are definitely a lot of people for whom it's a running diary. It's walking along the street or putting on my makeup or all these things, or updates on their location. And I don't get it. But the thing is, it is a versatile tool. Different people use it in different ways. And, that's just something that we have to accept.
There's really that ego. It's like the ego nourishing opiate thing about it too, where it's like you're at the point where someone presumably cares what you ate, or someone presumably cares about any random, because a lot of times, I mean, the shit that you see, and I start browsing around Twitter and stuff and all these things, it's just it's like a Tourette syndrome, there's Touretters. It's just this is on my mind, just pop it out there. And it's it's kind of, I mean, in the same way too, when we were talking about the whole death thing, it's I think a lot of people just at some point in their life imagine well, what's my funeral going to be like? Who's going to attend and stuff? And it's now with all this degree of interconnectivity and stuff, people are able to create these, tell themselves like, yeah, there's thousands of people who, who my passing would affect. And it's like, this seems like a combination of a morbid and an egotistical thought. But I think, I'm willing to venture that it's fairly common for someone at some point in their life to think
I'm
about.
actually, I'm actually just hoping that the four of you will combine your 25,000 followers and like live tweet my funeral. I mean, that's. I want to get that out of the way now. I think it'd be great if you guys could do that for the public.
We're gonna agonize over arrangement to get you like that scene in The Wire for. Sorry, spoiler. I won't say who, but for a significant character's death, they hook them up with a nice floral arrangement.
That's such a good.
I gotta see what the tweets would be like at Luke's funeral. They'll be like, "Quit fucking crying. Where's the refreshments?" And stuff like that.
I can't believe.
Wow, I can't believe only 5 people showed up.
But thankfully, they're all twittering, so the whole world's involved.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to switch us tracks on the same topic, but like, if you go finish your thought, it sounded like you were going to say something.
Well, I was actually going to veer us back off course, so never mind.
Well, we can go back off course whenever it wants, but I'll just to move us along a bit. I also want to like consider more aspects about how we receive information now. I mean, like, there was a time when most people would read the newspaper. They would be presented with a wide variety of perspectives, political opinion, so on and so forth, just reading the paper front to back. Now you have RSS feeds. You have people like able to exercise, an extreme degree of control over what comes to them. And so I think there's some danger, at least that we're discussing about, just the daily me and how we're basically insulating ourselves to hearing only what we want. And then also tied to the friend thing, I was thinking about how, back when you used to meet friends, or, in the way that most of us still do in the meet space, it's like you always have to find out the basics. You have to get some inclination of what their political perspective is. You usually find out about what kind of music they're into, if they're into games or whatever that may be. And it's like now you don't even need to do that anymore. Like you can shut people off from the get-go and be like, you click their page or whatever, and it's like, now listening to Rush Limbaugh or whatever, and it's just like you never get past that. But it's like I think that all of that information and the ability to select what specifically is coming our way, I think it's got some downsides to it as well.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think one of the really immediate downsides is, and this might just be an incredible character flaw on my part. I don't know. I've lived in Seattle now for almost 2 years. I have no connection whatsoever to local media here. Like, I don't read the Post-Intelligencer. I don't read the fucking Seattle All Weekly, whatever it's called. Like, I don't read any of that. I don't care. Like, I'm like, are we getting a toll on the 520 bridge or not? When do I have to vote on that? But otherwise, there's no. And I think part of it is because I have no interest whatsoever in picking up a physical copy of a newspaper or an alt weekly to read or anything like that. That's not even a priority, and I don't have time or the interest in it. And their websites are not terribly usable or interesting. There's no like fast digestible way to quickly understand what's going on. And otherwise, I mean, frankly, I don't really have the time or the energy to devote to like what's going on in my community. Like I don't know if that's a character flaw or if that is indicative of some greater problem of the failure of local media to be compelling. Like, when's the last time I watched the local news? I have no idea. 4 years ago. Like, why?
Well, are there communities that you do care about? Maybe communities that you lived in previously, like your hometown or San Francisco, where you try and keep up, or clearly, presumably, like you were probably interested in what happened with Ziff and 1UP and like that kind of stuff. I mean, there's this potential, like where the notion of place and community has evolved so much that you might not be super integrated into the physical location where you are, but there are other locations that are part real in terms of their actual places and part virtual in terms of how you access information about them that you do care about.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty close to the right answer. I mean, I don't follow anything that like geographically about San Francisco, but of course, when all the Ziff stuff went down, I was tuned into that and talking to people who it was affecting. I don't pay any attention to what's going on in my hometown. I actually, when I move, I just sort of migrate and buy everything new and get rid of everything I had. I don't pay attention to what's happening where I'm moving. I mean, isn't Seattle eventually supposed to like fall into the water and we're going to be like an island community someday? I think I saw that on on Armageddon week a month ago.
Well, and technology is part of what permits like this kind of migration. Like, we're on Skype, and the call part of this we're doing for free. And one of the things is like, so you could go. I mean, you could get assigned, like, let's say, I don't know, Bungie moved offices to Singapore. You could go there, and while you would be physically distant from the people that you cared about, between Skype and Facebook and Twitter and email and iChat and all these things, you could maintain like fairly connected relationships. The relationships probably wouldn't be that much more disconnected than they are with you living in Seattle.
Yeah, look at even what we're doing here right now. I mean, this is a phenomenal technology that the five of us can do this. We're in, 4 different cities amongst the five of us here?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Back to what, Luke, when you were saying, I was kind of surprised when you said you just don't have time. And I was thinking about, like, for me, I mean, I won't challenge you on it, but for me, I know, like, I'm upset with myself a lot of the time just because of the how much time I spend on the internet, and I think about how, I mean, every fucking thread at the NeoGAF forums I read, like every, and it's like that's all time I could have spent doing any number of other things. And it's like, it's so easy to get into this situation where you're topically browsing because let me start again. Like, because the internet puts so much information out there for you, you almost feel, and there's like an infinite number of like click out of this page into another page and another bit of tangentially related information. There's so many opportunities for that. You feel like, how do I, information overload? How do I track everything that's going on? And whereas the mindset before, and what I like to cultivate in equal part is to say, I don't care about all these other things. I want to read something that's, front to back, that's very thoroughly researched, that's about a very specific, subject. And it's so much easier for me when I sit down on a book to not, the biggest distraction I can get is to start digging around in the bibliography and like making a mental note of books for additional reading. Whereas, like on the internet, it's just like everything I constantly feel hurried for time because I know that any second I'm looking at one link is a second I'm not looking at another link.
Or twittering that link on your Twitter feed.
Exactly.
There's so many ways to go with this. One thing I want to say about that when you mentioned that was I've been thinking lately about every time it doesn't matter actually what office I'm talking about. It's not necessarily EA where I work, but other places I've worked or when I visit other people at the office. The chance when you walk by anybody's cube or office or whatever and they're on the web is what? 80%? 90%? Everybody's on the web all fucking day. And, I've occasionally joked with people at work, like, what did we do at work before the internet?
Work.
And I actually do remember that. I do remember. I'm that old. Where, yeah, you didn't have this constant, 8, 9 hour, however many hours a day you spend at work, distraction to go off to all day long.
Were you
can I find out it's time? It's unbelievable how much time you could waste at work on the internet and get away with it.
Can I suggest what was going on back before the internet?
Yes.
You were smoking.
Yes.
You were smoking.
There was some of that.
Yeah,
However,
every 10 minutes going to take a smoke break. Like,
yeah, but
that was what was
you could
going on.
smoke at your desk back then too.
Oh, glory days.
Feet up.
Yeah.
How did it go? What happened? Did people bring like porno mags to work and shit? Just like pull that out of your desk every once in a while.
Well, no, but one of the things that sort of Shawn, you're talking about earlier is sort of sort of the I don't know if you call it the me space, but just sort of how we can partition and section off information. I mean, so one of the things that I read the New York Times, every day, usually around midnight when it goes live, and but I don't read it. When I used to get a print subscription, when I first moved to New York in '95, I had a print subscription, and I would pretty much read it from cover to cover. And now I read it on the web. And when I transitioned to the web originally, I would read a lot of it, but not the whole thing. And now I kind of mostly scan the front page to see if there are any interesting headlines or photos. I'll they below the fold, I guess, on their website. Then they have just some sort of headlines, and I'll scan those. Is there something I should be reading? I check the art section because I'm into movies and music and theater a bit. But I definitely don't read as much. But to me, that page is still important because I realize the importance of serendipity, that the way I have things sectioned off in my RSS feeds, I want to be able to expose myself to things I wouldn't be otherwise. And that's one of the interesting things about something like, Tumblr and some of the people whose Tumblr feeds I follow, is that they expose me to articles or music or cover bands or things I wouldn't have been aware of otherwise. And, being a somewhat creative person, and just sort of wanting to be informed, is I do want to be exposed to stuff that's not simply narrowcast. And so, I try to seek that stuff out, which is one of the things that's entertaining about, Shawn, about your Twitter feed, is that I get exposed to some things that I wouldn't be otherwise. I may have to check with my therapist on that, but, for the most part, it's not too scarring.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've said this before in other venues, but I have a real problem with reading in a browser. I find that the whole concept of the browser is almost like the opposite of real reading. And I do, have a million RSS feeds in Google Reader, and I do read the New York Times online and a couple of other newspapers. But I find that I just don't have that sort of quality reading experience that I have when I do get the paper on Sundays. Sundays I get the actual New York Times, and it's the most fun thing in the world because I just leave the computer off, I lay down on the couch, I drink some coffee, and just read. I don't read everything in it, but I read a lot of it. And there's something about having a whole bunch of content curated for you. Here's a huge bunch of content that could be interesting to you as determined by news professionals. Yeah. And I enjoy that. I enjoy having that delivered to me, and it's just a different kind of reading experience than when Shawn, what you were saying, being constantly led away by links or by social networking or comments by people on stories, being constantly distracted by the human element of the internet and all the communication that goes.
Reading on the internet for me is if you're sitting there trying to work in an office and there's 6 people standing around your cube or whatever. So it's printing something out or reading something, on paper is basically the equivalent of, what it actually is, going into my own room and shutting myself off from that. And imagine, like you're saying, fucking Steam, you're sitting there trying to read something, Steam windows, people, hey, Shawn, what do you think of this game? And then, Facebook's blown up. Your IM's flashing.
Bring back the whiskey guy.
I know, but Shawn, I actually did want to know what you thought of that game. I know that's how you felt about me.
No, and it's cool too. I don't want to offend those people because it's totally, hey, it's awesome that someone actually cares what I think about a game when there's that's always been, it's still neat to me because it's half the time when you think of podcasts and shit, the question you always ask yourself is, why the fuck would you just go have these conversations with your own friends? Why the fuck do you care? You see these threads, it's oh my God, talk about this game. And then they do, and it just gets a mention, and everyone's posting 20 smiley faces yes, what's it called? Got a mention. And it's really, do you need us to fucking validate your own point of view just by simply name checking something? But anyway, at the same time, so props to the people that do that. But after a while, it is annoying when it's all day. I mean, I'll be sitting there doing something. Hey, they don't know. Maybe it's my girlfriend and I are in a fight or something. She's telling me she hates me. And this is just hypothetical. It's not real. And then I hear, dude, what do you think of the 5th unlock in Dawn of War 2? Fucking hate it. And I hate you.
And you're all happy. I'm going west. Yay.
Well,
but yeah, I do think a lot of the internet just feels like a slot machine sometimes. You turn it on and all these things go nuts on you. It's all this crazy amount of stimulation. And maybe if you really grew up with it, because I didn't, I'm too old to have really grown up with it. Maybe that's normal to you, but to me, it's trying to concentrate and having 10 people hovering their mouths right next to my ears, just screaming at me,
At any point in this
that's an example from my teenage daughter again. And, keep in mind, first I'll preface it by saying that she is actually a great student. She's at an academic school in Oakland, and she has a very high GPA, okay? So she's a good student to start with. But right now she's in the position of having to write this big, long-term paper on Cambodia, okay? It's due in a couple months. And my wife, who studied Southeast Asia when she was in grad school, brought out this whole pile of books. We went to the library. We got her more books. She's got, 15 books about Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge sitting on her desk. And she is a reader. Despite all the time she has with all this various digital entertainment, she does read books. And given all that, she's still complaining about, why can't I just use Wikipedia? Because Wikipedia, I pick up these books and they're taking forever to get to the point. Like I'm reading 3 chapters and they're not even telling me yet what the Khmer Rouge is. I could just go to Wikipedia and just wiki Khmer Rouge and there it is right there. Why do I have to read all these freaking books?
You provided
it's an amazing perspective.
I just put a link up for you guys to open in a second, and this is exactly why not. Okay, go ahead and open the link, and I'll talk you through it. So the whole notion of quality of information that we have on the internet leads me into this other subject about how things would have been differently for each of us had we grown up in the internet era. For me, I probably would have had a lot more fun fucking with people, but I probably would have ended up in juvenile hall. Or, no joke, I probably would have gotten into serious trouble and done things that I hate myself for. Now, back then we'd come up with something clever to do at school to fuck with other people. And now it's like you get whole people of deviants like myself networking on these really, arcane subforums on the internet and basically coming up with ways to ruin people's lives. And here's an interesting example is that this thing that you're looking at is for a dangerous new drug called Jenkum. And the whole thing is with Jenkum is that you shit and you defecate and you urinate in a bottle and then you put a balloon up on the top. And then the methane and the ammonia will then expand that and fill that balloon up. You simply pop it off and then you huff that bad boy.
Can't you just buy some marijuana?
Okay, just wait though. This is just the story's not even to the good part yet. So you're looking at the pictures, you see the kid, take special note of the kid huffing on that fucking juice, on that pimp juice. So it's slang terms for this drug are butt hash, which I find particularly cool. And I don't know
That's
why.
pretty good.
But might.
Leroy Jenkins, that's
a yeah. So now that's a clue. Now you should pick up on that because the thing is that Jenkum actually doesn't exist.
Right.
Some kids on the fucking forum made this shit up and they said hey, let's just be ourselves and do this. Just like when Rory and I were talking about Wang Wang and how he, he's the little person actor who plays as Agent 00. We made up this whole story about how he got pregnant by sitting on a public toilet and touches cloaca or this or that. And so they basically did something stupid like that. But then they convinced another guy on the Totsie forum, and that's the kid in the picture. His name is Pickwick. And Pickwick was already on that forum talking about, showing pictures of himself huffing Raid and other things, and it sounded like a good time to him. So what he did was Pickwick they convinced him to take pictures of himself making and huffing Jenkum. So he did that. And then he came to his senses, I don't know, 6 to 10 hours after the fucking euphoria of the Jenkum. and he was like, hey, man, took down these pictures. And he's like, hopefully word doesn't get around about this, that I did this. But it was too late. Once something's on the internet, it's up there. So the next chain in the story is that they somehow got this into the hands of a local sheriff, the Collier County Sheriff's Office. And then they produced the information bulletin you see, and then they started to distribute that. It was picked up by Fox News, that wonderful bastion of journalistic integrity. It was picked up by a couple of other WINK local news, and they did full programs on it where they talked about, the dangers of being, addicted to Jenkum and stuff. And then on the Fox News story, they actually referred to it as butt hash. So for me, it's that's the fucking holy grail of griefing, right? I mean, what I do is jack shit. They got Fox News to say butt hash and warn people that their kids are going to be huffing their own ass. So, Jeff, there's 2 stories there. One is that's why your daughter shouldn't go to Wikipedia instead of consulting her stack of on fucking Pol Pot. And then the second is that.
Well, we don't use that exact reason, but yeah.
But I think also there's something there with what Jeff's saying, where people today want an exacto slice of information. You know, like she's searching for this very specific thing so she can hurry up and get her project done. And in the process, depriving herself of some contextual knowledge that would actually be, you know, educational. Instead of just trying to pick out the one thing that you need to learn so that you can make a good grade in school, you know, it's probably good to try to learn something for real about Cambodia or whatever you're writing.
What's scary is this is coming from a kid who generally likes to read Shakespeare, you know, who has obviously, you know, some certain scholarly DNA in there that is working. And yet, on the other hand, she's used to these certain shortcuts that she wants.
You should know, you're scanning a Wikipedia entry, you're looking for information. When you sit down and read a book, you're really immersed in it, and you're thinking about it, and you're asking your own questions, which is the most important part. So, sorry.
I think that's what you're doing with books when you get old, like us, though. I mean, when I was 14, 15, 16, I didn't give a shit about reading. In college, I didn't really care about reading, and I have a degree in English. But now that I'm old, like I get a different stack of books from Amazon every week and have like a bigger backlog of books.
That's called neuroplasticity, dude. Your brain's repairing fucking Jenkum damage.
It might be. I'm trying to apologize to it after what I've done to it.
But, yeah, I'm with you.
No, I think.
I mean, that's pretty much my story too. Is that like I was not a big reader in high school. I did come around in college, but yeah, it's true. You get older and you're more willing to sit down and have some serious time with something. But I'm not sure that we can just count on that being like the normal way that the brain operates, especially when you do grow up now with so many easy ways to slice out that information you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that, I mean, so I'm actually the opposite. I read a lot more when I was growing up, you know, than I do now, and that's one of the things that I try to. I'm always sort of like astonished now every time I pick up a book and read it. I don't want to make it seem like it's super not frequent, but it's just way less frequent than I would like it to be. But I'm like, wow, this is like, I love this. Like, I have to remind myself how much I like to read because I'm reading all the time, but so much of it is on screens, and it's increasingly now, it's like I fill like every sort of spare moment with screens. So I'm either looking at email on my or twittering on my BlackBerry. I'm calling up web pages on my iPhone. You know, those kinds of things. So I'm reading probably a lot more than I used to when I was growing up. But I'm not reading the kind of I would like to read more books and more law magazine articles. And you know, it's not that I don't have the time; it's that I don't make the time. Because like, and that may be something, you know, maybe I have in common with Jeff's daughter, because it's, you know, I want that sort of, it's that Burger King mentality, like have it your way, and what you want is that quick hit of information, that link, that distillation. And you're right, what a book about the Khmer Rouge or Cambodia offers is a chance to live in to enter a world rather than just be like a day trip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nicely said. So let's wrap up this first section. If you guys are all cool with that, so
can I just say I wanted to. There's been something on my mind about this whole topic that I wanted to say earlier when Luke was talking about, you know, not reading local newspapers and keeping up with the local stuff, and it really ties into also what we were talking about earlier with people becoming less and less anonymous online. The thing that I keep on hoping for is that this sort of phenomenon that's been happening with Facebook and MySpace and Twitter and all these things where we make social networks online, that eventually that stuff becomes localized, that eventually you become in contact with your physical neighbors that you live with in your neighborhood, and that you're able to sort of follow the things that are important to you, not just locally, but like really, really locally. That when someone in your neighborhood is about to have their house foreclosed on, and they're in a really bad time, and maybe you can help your neighbors out, or if you've had a problem with crime in your neighborhood, or if the school in your neighborhood is doing well or doing poorly, that you're sort of connected to that in these cool ways that we figured out to be connected with total strangers on the internet. I hope that we can eventually use that same kind of technology to get to know the people that we're in contact with in real life every day, you know? But anyway.
Cool. That concludes our message from Berkeley. And just kidding. Okay, so yeah, let's kick into the second section. And this is pretty much what you've been consuming. So that's what you put in your face, your ears, put in front of your eyes. What it sounds like. Anyone want to start off on this?
I'll talk about music just because I've been a bunch of my friends have been laughing at me because I've been going back through and getting caught up on like all of the greatest hip hop of all time, and sort of just adding like gig after gig after gig of rap to my music player at work. Mm-hmm. And the thing that this buddy of mine from college who always tried to cue me in on this stuff when I was in school, and I didn't pay attention because I was only listening to like Pavement Records and Velvet Underground albums in college. I was like, hey, man, Nas and Jay-Z had a pretty serious beef back in the day, huh? So I've been, like, I listened to Ether this week, and this is probably the first time I've ever heard Ether, and I'm like, wow, Jay-Z got cut up on that, and he's like, dude, this is 7 years old.
That's the bad thing about belatedly coming to something like that. Is like, I mean, I envy those people, you know? It's like with anything you like, and it's like they suddenly have access to this whole backlog. You know, like what would it be like to be able to hear whatever? I'll use the Beatles because that's the most, generic answer, but what would it be like to hear them for their first time when you're, 30 years old or something? In your case, like listening to Nas for the first time.
Yeah, it's been... Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. You get to be like the kid who discovers Led Zeppelin in high school and goes totally nuts for it and acts like he's like the first person who's ever discovered how awesome Led Zeppelin is and has to talk about it at every given moment.
Yeah. Takes you to the fucking Laserium show.
So Luke, are you doing this chronologically at all, or is it just sort of more like all over the place?
It's just been really schizophrenic and all over the place. Like I've had a bunch of rap over the years. I've just been trying to be more dedicated to understanding like what's good rap, because like I probably like the equivalent of like shitty pop music versions of rap, but there's the origin stuff is actually more interesting to me, and where it comes from is more interesting.
Eric B. and Rakim. Get that if you don't have it yet.
Okay.
There's a lot of like that's interesting to go through because there's a lot of like old stuff that just like it holds up, but it's weird. It takes a while to get past it because we've been polluted by like all the derivative shit for so long that like really old school hip hop. For a lot of people, the first thing that comes to mind is like some dude, like some fucking crusty old white dude hawking furniture on like a local ad or something, because it's like a million. I mean, just like in the 80s, it just became like the thing that everyone tried to copy, like that same like delivery and cadence. Mm-hmm. And so you hear the roots of that, and it takes a bit to separate it and see why. Okay, there's actually some really good stuff happening here, and like let's just forget about whatever like fucking Bernie and Phil's chair.
When you listen to big '90s hip hop like Tupac or something, and they have all those fucking R&B samples that later became like so cliche, and when you listen to it, it just seems so fucking cheesy, but you can't quite get back to the headspace of when that was actually a like fresh thing to do.
Some of that shit I think will just date, like auto-tune right now. Good God, like how are there still tracks being produced with auto-tune? That's that basic.
Back up off the vocoder, dude. Come on.
Well, and that's the thing about it is like for me, it's like I think back to like that song by Roger, "I Want to Be Your Man." Like I remember listening to vocoder songs back in the '80s, and like so when this thing came around and everyone's like auto-tune, I was like, wait, that's vocoder. This ain't new. But
yeah, you're like that was cheesy when like I mean some people liked it, but I mean it was cheesy for me when like even like Neil Young went down that path, Mm-hmm. It's like.
Well, it was cheesy when Peter Frampton used to talk through his guitar.
I personally, don't wait. I personally think that something being dated is actually not so bad. Like I think people see that as like a sort of that's when music dies, is when it becomes something where you can put a date on it and say, oh man, that sounds so 70s. But I think that's when people are really embracing the times and doing something that hooks into the moment, and when you can go back and listen to it and say, wow, that really sounds like 1985. I think that's awesome. It's a lot better than being a band in 2008 that sounds like a band from 1968 and has no moment for themselves.
When you hear shit on the radio today that still sounds like Creed or whatever.
Yeah. Nickelback still has a thriving career.
Yeah, like providing the soundtrack to 99% of the fucking YouTube videos ever made.
So are you guys familiar with DJ Neil Armstrong?
No.
So DJ Neil Armstrong is he's sort of now known for being Jay-Z's DJ. He goes on tour with Jay-Z and stuff like that. But the thing that's interesting about what he does is he has this thing called originals. And what he does is he takes tracks and mixes them with the songs that they're sampling from. So in the case of a song like Takeover by Jay-Z, which is on the Blueprint album, he'll start out with 5 to 1 by The Doors. Then he'll add in Fame by David Bowie. And then he'll mix it all the way up till he gets to recreating Takeover, then mix in Takeover, and then spin it back out. And so he's got a couple of albums of these things that he put together. And, it's always interesting to sort of find the samples, because a hip-hop song can sort of be like a time capsule in and of itself and sort of take you back through all of these points in time. It's like you pull out, if you guys ever get, Ultimate Breaks and Beats, you'll be listening to this stuff and be like, oh, wait, that's where that came from? That's where that came from? It's fascinating to sort of go through. The other thing that's interesting about sort of going back through, so I remember back when I used to write about music a little more frequently for Newsweek. So I did our first coverage of Eminem back in '99, 2000, and a friend of mine who's a music writer, or now he's a screenwriter. His name's Cheo Hodari Coker, and he wrote the movie Notorious. He was he'd been writing about hip-hop ever since we were both in college, and, there was stuff, I was always late to come to certain things, like the band NWA. I was growing up in Canada and just didn't understand, how these guys could be in the 80s calling themselves niggas. That made no sense to me. So, it took me time to get to them. I didn't get to them until a couple years later. And when NWA's second record came out, which was called Ethel Forzagen, says something else backwards, and I never really listened to it. And he was I was out in L.A. one time. He's like, no, you need to listen to this. And so I listened to the album, and what was interesting about it was that 90% of the buttons that Eminem was pushing on his quote-unquote first album, it wasn't really his first, and the album that came out after, NWA was doing on Ethel Forzagen, it was just less people were paying attention to it. And so that's the thing that's great about discovering stuff later is if you're doing it in a compressed time frame, there are connections that you might build between things that people who are experiencing it in sequence might not make.
Mm-hmm. NWA actually I find to be a really interesting example of things changing over time, because to me I listened to the Straight Outta Compton not too long ago, and it struck me how not scary it was. I mean, first of all, the music was a lot funkier than I remember it being. When I first heard it the first time, it was like, oh my God, what is this? This looks like Manson Family on record. It was scary. And now it actually strikes me the same way the Sex Pistols debut record does, as kind of a quaint product of its time. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if NWA Straight Outta Compton came out right now and hadn't existed before now, would it be as scary now as it seemed back then?
Well, of course not, I would say, because part of the way things are now has to do with the fact that of NWA's contribution to it. I mean, in that general sense of, the whole tradition of albums that came out that had some that were influenced by NWA or that were part of that same time frame basically helped us get to the point, for better or worse, where we're at now, where you consistently had to basically up the stakes, right? I mean, it's kind of like, when you listen to a lot of like metal, and I remember at the time having the exact same reaction to it, just like, oh man, these kids are like Satan worshipers, this shit's scary. And then you hear it now, or even like Grateful Dead, I'd think, man, these are like for some serious like drug fiends. That's got to be like some acid on audio. And then you hear it, and it's like, it's fucking hillbilly music. It's like, yeah.
Get out of here, Cotton Joe. I've been married a long time ago.
Like,
where did you go?
Yeah, when I was in high school, Black Sabbath was like this evil forbidden fruit. Like, oh my God, have you guys heard this Black Sabbath record? And that was like, God forbid our parents would hear that. And yeah, you listen to it now, and it's like the cheesiest, like...
It's like a gentle, serene pop record.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Dragon Force now, right? It's like the same thing.
It's like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Of metal music.
Oh, come on.
My God.
Come on.
Remember, even like how it's the same with all these topics. It's like, later on after you get Ice-T doing like, Cop Killer, and then you get beyond that to the point where, or you had like Two Live Crew, which was so scandalous at the time. And it's like, right. I mean, like, look at like a fucking R. Kelly show. And it's just like a bunch of old ladies, and him basically telling them how he's basically like, him like phone sexing them for an entire concert. And
of course, we could do
like,
a whole
just
show
kids,
just on the. We could do a whole show on the career of Flavor Flav, right?
Oh my goodness!
Sadly, we could.
Flavor Flav went from rapping about women who watch Channel Zero to being on Channel Zero. It's a little disturbing. But the one other thing I want to say is that the interesting thing is like in music, like the chronology we sort of roughly laid out, it feels like it's like a straight line. But I remember, this was a while ago, I can't remember what movie it was that came out at the time, but, at Newsweek they were considering doing a story on, violence in movies, and, the idea was, it had increased. And I was pushing back on this idea because I was sort of saying, like, well, look at the stuff that you saw in movies in the 70s. I mean, look at the climax of Taxi Driver, or A Clockwork Orange, or Straw Dogs, or movies like that. Or even sort of the gore era that we entered into in the 80s, right? Like where it was all about blood and viscera in horror movies. And I was saying, like, in a lot of ways, and this was like in the late 90s we were considering doing this. I was saying, like, in a lot of ways, it's not a straight line. I don't think things have gotten worse, at least in terms of the intensity. There might be more pervasive use of violence, but in terms of intensity, I think you could look to these touchstones and sort of say these things have actually been scaled back. Of course, then, we got into the torture porn moment with Saw and, the Eli Roth movies, and, that's a whole other thing. But it's not always a straight line.
The media, in some respects, the media censors itself, just like, they traditionally have with war, where we don't see, even with how Americans understood World War II, we just really, really screened off from the typical battlefield scene or something. And we look at the fact that we're just now able to photograph coffins of our troops coming back from war zones and stuff. But then at the same time, so that's the public sphere, the official sanctioned television sphere. And at the same time, you have on the internet where you can watch beheadings. You can see any sort of, any of the horrible range of human activity is just flat out available for you there. And so...
beheading.
No, but that's...
I really regret the beheading that I watched. I watched a beheading once online. It was not...
Really?
I really regret doing it.
Is there a spurt? I mean, I've never watched one. Like, I imagine, is it like a clean cut, or is it like a sawing type thing?
It's a sawing kind of thing. It takes a long time to get the head off. It's gross.
Yeah, the stuff that's available on the internet is insane. But again, I mean, it's like in that case, that's the reality, right? I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about, say, one of the people that was taken in either Iraq or Afghanistan in the early war. And then just like when we see the footage of like AC-130 gunships doing their work, or Apache helicopters, it's such a different face of war compared to the stylized and cleaned up versions we get in Hollywood, where like even we have like when Saving Private Ryan came out, it wasn't as scandalous, but it was shocking to a lot of people because it was approaching some of that, But it's like the real thing is just like so. No, I don't even know where I'm going with this, other than saying that, like, yeah, I do think that that there is fluctuation, and I think they're scaling back, and then sometimes there's an escalation of tolerance in the things that we show. But I mean, at the same time, we have this like separate parallel track with the internet where it's really basically just blowing the doors off of everything.
Well, and this gets back to stuff we were talking about earlier with Facebook and Twitter and those kinds of things, because, you know, the internet is sort of, it has underground aspects to it, but because of its open nature, that stuff can be pushed into the foreground at any time. You know, the media can drop in. And so, you know, for instance, on the multiplayer blog at MTV, they have a section they do daily, which is, you know, what are people in the game industry saying on Twitter, right? And in the same way, you know, something that, you know, might be, you know, sort of like a video that's created somewhere or something, and then, like, boom, that gets put into Facebook, and, you know, people are consuming it on Facebook, and then it rises to the level where, you know, now the media's covering on it, you know, so that stuff goes from the underground to overground, you know, and that can happen in a very short period of time. You know, the movies that I was talking about, like A Clockwork Orange or Straw Dogs or Deliverance, the thing there is like, well, what happens when those things are just when, you know, I guess, you know, for want of a better term, the money shots, so like the parts that were, you know, back in the film days, you could only see those in context, right? Unless you were a projectionist who would have had access to the actual reel, you would, like, you know, you'd watch it from beginning to end in a movie theater. In the VHS era, you could fast forward it. In DVD era, you can chapter skip to it.
And in the YouTube era, you can mix it up and basically expose us all to the Ludovico treatment.
Exactly. And so, like, so what does that do when, you know, decontextualization and recontextualization is the norm? You know, something that might be a very emotional sort of moment, you know, what happens when you just sort of isolate it? And that's something that I think about as, you know, as I betrayed my old profession and, you know, jump in the direction with a lot of you, is thinking about, like, how, you know, snippets of a game, something that makes complete sense in context, what happens, like, when that gets, like, ripped out of context. And you don't have control over that, obviously. I mean, we exist in a remix culture, but it's something that I think should give creators, you know, pause. I don't mean don't do it, but think about it.
If you really regret that really, you know, awful 2-minute cutscene that you think is passable in context, but that when someone puts it online makes your game look like the most ridiculous thing on earth.
There's our transition, baby. Robert and I have both been playing Resident Evil 5. I know you have a little bit in, Guy, or maybe as much as we have. Luke, have you been playing it yet?
No, I haven't. No, I only play Street Fighter right now.
So, really
I'm just practicing my Balrog, kicking ass, talking shit on the internet.
I'm like, I'll let Robert say what he thinks, but well, I don't know. I guess I'm not surprised, but I know that it seemed like a lot of the discussion about Resident Evil 5, about its gameplay and about its quality, you know, interactive entertainment has been sort of like a little more range than I'm used to seeing where games are concerned. You know, for the most part, we often see like a uniform course on stuff, and I'm really enjoying it. I think there's a whole lot there that makes it a really, really standout co-op game. I wouldn't really want to play it on my own, but let you take it from there, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really it's weird in that it's almost exactly like Resident Evil 4 in the way that it plays. I mean, it's got that same kind of combat, which a lot of people are expressing frustration with in the whole, you know, not moving and shooting at the same time. But I think it's kind of an interesting way to do an action game, because you know, if you did that sort of game where you had like Gears of War control and you had like zombies sort of creeping on you, obviously you could just sort of serve everyone on the screen easily, and it becomes about, you know, positioning yourself in the level and stuff. But playing it with another person makes it totally refreshing in a weird way. I mean, it plays exactly like Resident Evil 4, but playing it with Shawn, which I said on Twitter is like watching a magic show with Penn Jillette, because he's just constantly telling you like, oh, here comes the boss fight. See the oven. Like he's constantly pointing out the rabbit already inside the hat before it gets pulled out. But that's okay.
Well, that specific case is like, you know, early in the game when you first like fight the leech guy. Before that, we walked into a room. I saw an oven. I saw a button to turn it on, and I was like, okay, let's go around the hallway, trigger the cutscene, and then bring the boss back here. And it was just like, I mean, it just seemed totally obvious, right? And the interesting thing for me there was to consider whether or not what would have happened had they not telegraphed that and had they put that basically on the other side of the cutscene. And the downside would be that you wouldn't be familiar with the tactical space. You wouldn't have any, you'd have to on the fly basically assess the environment and assess your options for dealing with this creature. And I don't think that would be a more difficult challenge, but it would also be, more tense. And then I think for those of us that are like keen to looking to finding the rabbit in the hat, it might have worked that way. But what you were saying though about Gears of War, a lot of people are comparing it to this game. They seem to assume that this game has to be like Gears of War. That in itself is interesting because it's like shooters are for the most part largely the same one to another as far as the interface goes, and people just seem to accept that that's a genre that's gelled. Whereas there's this they think there's this new subgenre of close camera over the shoulder that RE4 pretty much invented. That is still rapidly developing, and that you're behind the times if you're not copying the other entries in the subgenre. And for me, it's like Gears of War still has this modal situation. It's that it's a tactical choice whether or not you want to you're going to take cover and you're not going to be hit, or you can fire. And while you can technically walk and fire, you're still basically forced to decide whether or not I'm going to take cover or whether I'm going to be active. And in this game, it's just the modal shift is whether or not you're moving or shooting, and it's working really, really well for me still.
Yeah. I think it's a really a different kind of game, and I don't understand the comparison. But what I like about playing it with Shawn is that he is so funny about the difficulty coming up. Like, he'll enter a room and be like, "Oh man, some shit's gonna happen here." "Oh man, watch out!" Like, he doesn't get scared, but he gets totally worried about the coming onslaught of zombies. Whoa, what the fuck was that?
That was the fucking coming onslaught of zombies.
Yeah, what the?
That was some pipe sound in my apartment. I apologize for the for the killer whale sound that I just erupted. But
we keep on hearing some New York City. Like, I keep on hearing like sirens and just the
cops taking
sounds
props.
of life.
Hey, I rep Brooklyn to the fullest.
Back on the game thing, a couple things that stand out for me is that, like, well, I mean, even last night in our session we played, we were on, I think it was like a level 2 or something, where we encountered it's basically a caterpillar with a bat head on it. And aside from, like, that's typical Resident Evil, like, how it appeared, I thought that was like a really well designed boss encounter, because when you look at it, it's like it was perfectly designed for co-op, and it's like the boss has a weak spot, as most bosses tend to do, but it's not overly telegraphed. They're not using God shading on it to just like really make it stick out. And it's like, it makes sense in the context of this creature. It's a soft underbelly, but it's able to curve its caterpillar tail in such a way that it's not always visible. But when it chases one player, it has to expose its hind end to the other player. And so you get this cool like front and follow mechanic where it's like, okay, you run and then I'll be the one like following him. And then if he turns around, so you have some cool situations there. That stage that the battle occurs in has like these little shacks that you can go in, and while going in the shack will protect you in the short term. You can go in there and say like, okay, let's let's form some sort of strategy here. Let's reload ammo. Give me some of this ammo. The thing is still like scaring the shit out of you because it's flailing to try to break the shack down, and of course it eventually will. And so it's like you're basically taking a squat in an outhouse, and then the whole thing gets flies apart around you, and you're sitting there with your pants down. And so you got to keep moving. What else did I like about it? Oh, it was cool too how like they introduced mines in that part, and when you successfully use the mine on the boss, it throws it it stuns the thing, but in such a way that you get to go up to it and you get to shoot it, but you get to look at it too, which is cool because I mean they always have these really cool bosses in games, but it's so lethal that you're not really focusing. You're focusing on the fact that it's going to kill you. You're not really appreciating like what the fuck it even looks like. And I thought that was cool. It's kind of like get a chance to take a look at the thing.
Yeah, it was like defanged for a minute, and you get to go up and pelt it with bullets, which is another one of those funny things about it. Like last night when we were playing and we hit this gigant, what do you call this? Gigante? Like this giant, it's this giant, beast thing that comes after us, and we were both using these stationary guns, and it was hilarious because we were shooting I don't know, 1,000 bullets a second into this thing's face, and it would lean like right up into the screen, and you would just see it being shot with all these bullets, and it was so hilarious.
It was all surreal. It's like,
right. I mean, do you think that how well do you think the game sort of sells that idea that like it's resistant to damage in a way that's sort of intrinsic to what you're witnessing, other than just sort of like, hey, it's the boss and it takes a lot of damage. You're just like shoot.
What they do, works pretty well. It's like they have him. I mean, they're indicating that you are hitting him, and that's why you get that wonkiness with his face like jerking around. It's kind of better than him just sort of like staying stone faced with bullets, seemingly disappearing into it. But then he'll charge up to do these big telegraphed attacks, and you stop him, and then he'll reel back, and you'll disrupt what he's about to do. And he'll stagger and roam around a bit. And just again, like you're saying, because of the presentation, it's not like some skinny little dude. You don't need to put a sign over his head that says this guy has X amount of hit points. He just basically, his whole body announces the fact that he's got like 10,000 hit points or whatever.
Yeah, I think it does. I personally wanted more feedback at that, and that kind of thing, like to get a sense, because I was playing with Stephen Totillo from MTV News, and I felt like other than sort of cycling through the stages of the attack, the stages of attacks that the boss has, and sort of realizing that you're probably going to have to cycle through it either 2 times or 3 times because that's what bosses do. The sense that you were staggering him, that he was progressively being worn down. I didn't really feel like that was present, and I feel like that's an issue with sort of what you're saying, Shawn, about like not telegraphing the weak spots or those kinds of things. I think one of the things that's one of those things that's great in theory and design and sometimes in practice, but the flip side is that there are all sorts of cues that if this were quote-unquote real life that would be present that simply aren't there, and that's the reason why you have the God shader, is to cue you to those things. So I'm not saying the solution is the God shader, but I definitely think that there were stun animations or stagger animations or things that they could have done to make that stuff read more strongly.
I disagree on that, because in this game I'm really convinced that it was a design choice. It wasn't just an accident or a failure on their part, but because similarly, when you encounter the maul-wielding giant guy in the town square, and then when you encounter the first chainsaw guy, neither of them do anything to indicate. Like you're saying, sometimes there's health meters. I think that's that's the easiest way to do it. Other times they might have something clever like there are 3 glowing spots that indicate his health level on his body or whatever. They just drain as you continue to do damage to him or something like that. But here they chose not to necessarily give you the player that first encounters the mall guy really doesn't know if they can kill him or not. They have some sense that if they hang around long enough, they might be rescued or something. But of course you can kill them, but they don't announce that. And I think it's deliberate, because it's kind of scary to be in a situation against a creature where you really don't know. It's like, I'm doing everything I can. I'm going to just try to stay alive, but I'm really not certain like how impervious to harm this thing is. And I mean, you're saying it's not necessarily working for you, at least in the case of the one guy, but like, I kind of appreciate it. I mean, it was hectic. I know when Robert and I were running around, and it's like, okay, we got this, like, we shot this guy so many times. I've sniped him. I've hit him with explosive barrels, but he just keeps coming. And we never got to the point where we stopped and said, and this is for the chainsaw guy, where we're like, okay, this is just fucking grating now. Like, when is this stupid thing going to end? It was just like we were still kept in the moment, like we're like worried about escaping the guy more so than just killing him and getting through with the section.
Yeah, that's right.
But another part of the game that I appreciate is like how a lot of times, I was comparing it to God of War, where they had these gated scenarios where they'll introduce a number of enemies and then erect a gate and then, remove those when you've killed all the enemies there. And there's something to be said for that approach, but like they don't do that so often in Resident Evil 5. And it's very, very often it makes sense to just run. You stop and say, it's a tactical choice. Do I want to stop? Maybe these guys are going to drop some ammo or money. Or like, is this not a fight that I'm going to win? Is this a fight that I'm not even meant to win? And should I run? And it's kind of a cool experience to get to that moment. It's got like some shades of Left 4 Dead to it. Like Robert, we're in that mine when we emerged from the part when we were holding taking turns holding the flashlight, and then you get into this big central structure and you can work your way up, and you could just sit there and try to like fight these guys and take up tactical positions and one by one, through attrition, take them out. But we just basically made a run for it, and it was like all hell broke loose, and it was crazy. And it was like, are you behind me? Are you behind me? Okay, it's still behind me. And it really felt like those moments when you have that same option in Left 4 Dead, and you start to approach the safe house, and you just say, like, fuck it, let's make a break for it. Throw all the strategy out the window. And I mean, I guess I'm just saying I appreciate that they're allowing that, to be a part of the game, not forcing you to basically jump through all their hoops.
Yeah. So what's Jeff doing? What's Jeff consuming?
Listening. I'm listening quietly.
No, you're on. We were talking about internet distractions. I know you're on your cell phone and you're on your Facebook at the exact same time right now, Jeff.
No,
So
I have a little puppy here.
What you been doing?
What have I been doing? Well, I actually am embarrassed to say I've been playing a whole lot of WoW again. I've been completely sucked back at that.
Why are you embarrassed about that?
Discovered. Well, because it's 5 years old now. It's probably time to move on.
But it's what everyone does. Everyone that's in game design, it's like all they do is play World of Warcraft, night after night after night. Yeah.
Yep. Very true. I hear talk about that all the time at my office. That tends to be what game chat revolves around. Though right now this week it's been Resident Evil 5, of course. So it's kind of whatever the newest latest thing is that's out right now. Plus WoW.
Are you playing? That game co-op?
What game?
Resident Evil 5.
I don't have it yet. I can't play my 360 right now because I broke my wireless controller over a tantrum. So
you had a tantrum. Anyone else want to?
Well,
go ahead.
Right now, I'm in the midst of reading the book Patient Zero by Jonathan Mayberry, Maberry. It's a zombie book. I've been reading a number of zombie books as I cogitate over the zombie moment that we're in, and sort of doing research for an idea I have. But basically, it's kind of interesting because it combines sort of like the hard-boiled cop with contemporary terrorism with zombies, and it's kind of entertaining. I mean, I'm not loving it as much as World War Z, which I thought was a pretty terrific book, a lot better than I thought it was going to be, and a lot more imaginative. I mean, World War Z, there were zombie scenarios in there that I was like, wow, I don't think I've seen that in a movie before.
Really?
And I got my hand on the script for World War Z, actually. And it's a little disappointing because a lot of the best sections in the book aren't there. I mean, they make the narrator a character and sort of give you a sense of, sort of the climactic moments of the narrator, and they basically take one of the stories out of the book and make that the traumatic incident for the narrator. But like my favorite story, I don't know how many of you guys read it, but my favorite story in there is the story of this Chinese nuclear subcaptain, and that was pretty amazing in the book. It's not in the movie. There's another one with a Japanese guy who, basically, manages to get from his apartment to another one a couple of floors below and stumbles across a samurai sword and then starts using that and meets up with a blind swordsman. That's not in there. Anyway, World War Z is kind of the I don't know, the pick a big, amazing book of zombie books. And Patient Zero isn't kind of like that. And it reminds me of like the impatience I have with sort of how heroes are constructed in, pop literature, So, of course, the guy's like better looking than the other people, and he's like more badass than the other people, and he's more this. And I'm just like, really? That's like so not interesting. But that said, they've got a couple interesting hooks, and I'm rolling with it.
Did you read the Walking Dead comic book series by any chance?
So I read a little bit of it, and I've read a little bit of Marvel Zombies. The irony is I love zombies in movies. I love them in books. I love them in games. Really don't work for me in comic books. Like in a graphic arts medium like comics, I find it like completely uninteresting.
Weird. I wonder when you say, I mean, I'm not going to die if I can't convince you to try it. But like, if you read just a little bit at the very beginning, the first few issues had a different artist, and it's now like almost, I think it's on like issue 59 or something. But I would say there's a whole lot of really interesting stuff there. And for me, it's the case where like I just haven't traditionally been interested in zombies at all, and this is the book, the piece of media that has got me interested in them.
I concur with that. And the series really does pick up after the first few issues. So,
I mean, there's just so many, like, I don't want to spoil it, which is kind of makes the discussion, almost not worth having. But there are a number of really, like I said, really interesting things that I'm not like so versed in zombie fiction as you to identify and say, hey, maybe someone else has done this. This is just a new take on that. But I stay genuinely surprised, and ultimately it's just like good character work.
Yeah, well, I'll make a point of getting up on it, and then maybe in a future show we can talk about it.
That sounds good to me. I'll take a look at the maybe you'll tell me about your zombie project and what it pertains to, but I'll take a look at the World War Z.
Yeah, I would recommend World War Z.
Let's also be sure to deconstruct Battlestar Galactica after it ends next week.
Oh God, I'm just so glad it's over.
Me too. That's my basic.
So
that's my
fucking long.
Agreed.
Goodbye.
We'll come back to that.
I think that judging by Jeff's connection, I think that he's playing WoW right now.
I would not do that.
Okay.
Am I crapping out on you guys?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit, but we got your local recording, so it'll all work out.
Yeah.
Still good.
Okay, so Robert, what were you about to say?
Oh no, I was just gonna say since we were talking about what we've been consuming, that I am super grateful that this year that this is such a Berkeley thing, but just this week they finally started stocking this kind of orange that I eat like 15 of a day at my local grocery store called a Pixie Mandarin. And for people who don't have access to like Northern California produce, this is like candy that grows on a tree. It's like if you imagine the taste of like a creamsicle ice cream bar, just like melt that and put it inside a grape skin, and then put that inside of an orange that you can peel in like 2 seconds completely, and you have the recipe for just something that you will like eat until you either go broke or throw up.
Okay, so how different is it from
That reminds me that last week I had my first ever kumquat, and it was really good.
Yeah, that's
never had a kumquat
taste.
I dig them. It's weird to eat the skin, but they're totally different.
Is what adds to it. The skin is sort of like the Reese's peanut butter cup part. It's like sour on the outside, sour on the inside, sweet on the outside. You have to have both together.
Definitely.
True.
That's me on kumquats. You heard me.
I'll give you a quick rundown on a comic. I picked up the Fantastic Four trade paperback collection of the run that Mark Millar and Brian Hitch did. I was interested in them in the first place because they did the Ultimates, which I thought was great. And the reason that it worked was basically they took let's take the key Marvel superheroes that eventually composed the Avengers and rewrite them in a modern setting. So they're basically people like us. They're worried about their Facebook status. They're worried about their Twitter followers and all this stuff. And it really worked because the superpowers were almost sort of like the background, and it was about like the Hulk, Banner, for example. When he transformed into the Hulk, he just was like had a fucking raging hard on for any woman he would see, and the way Captain America coming back and having beef with all like how just like basically fucked up the modern world is compared to his expectations and just having a hard time dealing with it. So it basically worked on those lines. And then the Fantastic Four doesn't work for just like the exact opposite reason. I mean, I don't know if you know much about the Fantastic Four, but it's kind of like reminds me of it's like the comic book version of like S&M sex or something. I mean, it's like someone gets so bored of sex that they got to like hang upside down like a fucking moonbat and whip some shit in order to like get off on it. It's kind of like with the comic books. It's like I've seen everything. It's not enough to have claws pop out your fucking hands. You got to like go to some alternate dimension and like do some other kind of hooey. And so Fantastic Four has always been about that. And everyone who writes it falls in the trap of like, how do I make it more fucking ridiculous and extreme? than anyone else who's had a run on this book. And so Millar starts off with like introducing this idea that the world is going to die. You know, like we know that in 10 years, like Earth is toast. There's nothing irreversible climatic change, all this other shit. So what happens is there's this one group of rich people that, and then here's the first alarm, is they fucking make another Earth in an alternate dimension. And when I say make it, they make it like the fucking Death Star, but it's Earth and it's got its own moon, and they plan to basically teleport everyone en masse there and repopulate it. And so the first part, I was like, I mean, my whole problem with this run is like just suspension of disbelief. And I think like you can get away in any series with asking people to suspend their disbelief along a few key lines, you know, and it's not an issue at all. But when everything you're doing is nothing but just like a request for fucking someone to suspend their disbelief, it starts to get problematic. Now, that's one way where Lost has been an issue for me. But anyway, so they make this planet. You buy that. You're like, okay, cool, that's fun. And then they decide that no one's going to have any weapons or powers. No one's going to fight in this place. And we're going to like basically have one policeman for the whole world. And this is giant like robotic fucking suit, you know, or something. And it'll blast anyone who acts up or who gets a gun. Except it's shaped like Captain America. And it's like, okay, assuming you're taking the fucking population of the world to this new planet, that should be the first warning sign, is that when there's like a giant robot Captain America to whip you into shape. And then like, so, you know, even at that point, I'm like, okay, this is like they, for whatever reason, they have the technology to build another planet, but they don't have the technology to fix their one on. Then it introduced like this other thing, and that's that like these people from the future, Earth 500 years in the future, like superheroes, and like one of them is the Invisible Woman who's still alive somehow. They actually come back. And their thing is that they realize the Earth is going to die in 500 years from now. And so they're coming back not to fix it, not to fix things so that Earth doesn't die 500 years from now, but to teleport the population of the Earth 500 years in the future to the present day. So again, it's like, okay, if you got like no issues with time paradox and all these other like problems with teleporting the entire planet back, you know, 500 years, surely you don't have a problem with like coming up with solving whatever fucking chain of, you know, preventing whatever chain of events led to the imminent destruction of the planet then. So anyway, like the short version is just tons of shit like that, and it gets worse and worse. And it's like, I mean, it's one thing to say like Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, goes back in time to celebrate his anniversary with his wife to the moment where they first met, and they sort of like watch themselves meet one another through like a cafe window or something. But then it's another to get into like all this other shit that they have going on, and it's just like one thing after another that just really kills it.
The reason I thought
fuck you! I read the Fantastic Four and I'm proud of it.
No,
that sounds fucking lame.
No.
I'm so high right now.
I wish it was the kind of shit that made me wish a comic book store operated like GameStop, because I would have totally taken it back for like another Walking Dead or something.
Quick timeout.
I think we need to call Jeff again.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I sort of paused.
Oh shit. Okay, let's call him in and then wrap it up.
I think his wife came and unplugged his connection or something.
Oh shit, that would be awesome.
So someone picked up the phone. He's like, I'm online.
He was. I heard typing. I heard typing. I heard his connection shitting out, and like I didn't know who it was. And he admitted that the last time he did Gamers with Jobs, he was just like doing all sorts of other shit in the back. I know you can hear this, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm back. But I wasn't. This time I wasn't. That was weird. What did it show me? Did it show me disconnecting?
Yes.
That sucks. I lost you. You were the only person who could probably like understand where I was coming from with the Fantastic Four nonsense. You fucking left me.
I cut out in the middle of your story there.
Yeah. Well, it's not much of a story other than that you shouldn't probably waste the time or the money to get that book and read it.
The thing is,
your connection sounds better now, Jeff. To me,
that's really weird.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. Maybe my LAN like blipped or something.
Whatever
okay.
blipped means.
Women have a strange power.
We thought,
Strange.
we thought your wife came and unplugged you.
Yeah, no.
Has that ever
Coming
happened?
No.
Has anyone in this group right here ever had a woman come in and basically like, unplug their computer or tell them to get off?
Oh, my mom when I was a kid. Yeah. Definitely.
Did she?
Of course, man. I love my mom. She's great. But my mom was the kind of mom who would, I don't know if this is the kind of mom, but my mom in particular would have these moments. I don't really, even now, I don't really understand it, but we had these huge rolls of newsprint for no reason whatsoever. No reason. Like, they're there if you want to draw on them. Like, okay. Like, huge rolls of newsprint. I came downstairs once when I was in high school, and the entire door to my bedroom, and my bedroom was in the basement of the house that we had finished while I was growing up. The entire door to my bedroom was a newsprint message from my mom in like probably the equivalent of like all caps, like 70 Arial font. Like, I swear to God, Luke Michael, if you don't clean this room, I'm going to move out of this house. Like, just this huge like newsprinting meltdown greeting me as I went to go into my room, and I'm like, yeah, fuck it, I'm just gonna like go play with some G.I. Joes or get on the internet or something. Yeah, she would do all kinds of shit. Like, and I was like not a, I mean, you know, my parents would come down to kick me off of the internet because they wanted to, like, that's why I laughed so hard when Robert said it. Like, well, why do you use the phone? Like, no one's gonna call you. Like, your parents aren't old enough to be dying yet. Like, they're not. So, like, and let's face it, like, you don't want my little sister. The sister is 2 years younger than me. She's like, boys don't like her yet. She's not. She's like still kind of fat. Like,
back when
like, just leave me alone and let me. And then it's like, oh, they like ripped the 56K thing out of the wall.
That's an emasculating experience for people. Like, back when I worked at EGM, I would play online, like Battlefield with this guy whose name was Sal FPS, and it was funny because Rory was in there at the time too, and like, you know, we'd always play with Sal, and he'd put his little brother on now and then. He's like, "Can my brother play with me?" And we're like, "Dude, why does he have to be in like TeamSpeak with us?" And then like the whole time we're playing, his little brother would be like, Chen, and then I'd be like, what's up, Victor? And he'd be like, I killed him. And I'd be like, he's somewhere else on the map. I don't even know where the fuck he's at. And I'm just like, awesome, Victor, keep it up. You're doing a good job for his team. And then like for Sal was playing with us this other night, and he was always kind of like me now, whispering at night when Melissa's asleep. He's always whispering because his grandma's like the same fucking sleeping or some shit. And then he woke her up, and I heard yelling. And then like his mom came in, and so we're just sitting there in disbelief as we hear this, you know, his mom screaming at him and him tough talking her back because, of course, you know, he's like in high school or something. He's all with his friends, you know, with his older friends playing games and showing them that, like, yeah, I don't have to take no shit from my mom. So he's just like, get out of here, Mom. And then the next thing I heard was like this fucking giant walloping sound, like a week away. It's like his fucking headset getting slapped off his fucking head and knocking him over in his chair, and then him like instantly reverting to like the little bitch mode, like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I suppose.
Moms have fucking strange powers, man.
And they should. I mean, it's a good thing they do.
Even at this age, too. I bet if my mom was here now staying with us, and my wife said to her something like, you know, Jeff's been up there for 2 hours. He said it was only going to go an hour. We need to walk the dog. And my mom came up here and said something to me, I'd be off of here in 1 second because I'd be scared.
How would you explain yourself?
I did 40.
I'm making a podcast. What's a podcast? For the internet. Who's going to listen to this shit? Like,
I'm worried about in front of my Twitter followers.
Yeah. What's a Twitter? I can so picture it that it actually gives me the chills just thinking about it. I can so hear her. You get down there and pay attention to your wife right now.
Having a woman or a family like in your life is such a good reality check for when we get so wrapped up in this shit, you know, in like an online debate or something, and it's like you're supposed to, you know, you told your wife or whatever you're going to go do something, and you're just like 1 second, and then she comes in and she's like, what the fuck are you doing? And then you ask yourself that. And you're unable to ask yourself that from the same point of view until someone else forces you to. And then you're like, oh yeah, you're right. You just turn the power off and fucking walk away.
Why does it take both of you to walk the dog? Seems like an awesome opportunity for her to go walk the dog while you're having mancation.
Jeff's on
it's like a right. It's an occasion in which you bond as a couple to walk together, as opposed to me being here, you know, wanking off on the computer with dorks. So
wait, is that what you're doing while we're talking?
Wait a minute. I'm the only. You guys are too, right?
I think we just found the name.
I thought that's what.
Oh God, yes, we did.
Yeah,
we did.
That's
I think
that might be the name. Yeah,
a guy might not like being associated with, for business purposes, being associated with the fucking Circle Jerk Productions, but I'm just saying, think about it.
Well, I'll be the D'Artagnan of Circle Jerk, so I have at least some plausible deniability.
This is what we can. Yeah, then it's like our first topic is called the cracker, like every biscuit or whatever. I mean, you know that, right? I mean, everyone here is like the whole notion that you put the cracker or the biscuit or whatever in the center of the circle jerk, and so that's our first topic. This week's cracker is.
I am laying on. I'm laying on my living room floor right now, and mostly all I'm doing is laughing, and my wife, who actually has a life, is like working and doing stuff and passing me notes about, should I heat up lunch, and just looking at me like she's seeing the unraveling of something she really cares about. Like, oh my God, if it's come to this.
And this, you're going to go and apologize to her, and you're going to sound like Sal and his mom, dude.
I am.
Okay, how about this then? Why don't you get her and put her on and just have her take us out with like some admonition?
She's not gonna do that, man.
That's an awesome idea.
Please, dude, just bring her over. One of you, someone get a woman in here and have.
Hey, Hunt, will you admonish us all and end the podcast? She said she refuses to participate in the podcast.
Tell her to scream, turn that shit off in the background, and then that's it. We'll just end.
Can you just yell, like, turn that shit off? Can you just yell it? Just yell, turn that shit off. She's not going to do it. No.
Man.
No,
Okay.
man.
Well, I guess we got to keep doing it until she gets angry enough to yell.
No, she just leave, man. You should see the look of disapproval in her face.
It's like a sour scowl.
Yeah. All right. It's not going to happen, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay. So on that note, we'll conclude. And this has been a Circle Jerk production.